Hello, my name is Abby, and today I'll be talking about how sea level rise is impacting the Netherlands. To begin, I would like to talk about the geography of the Netherlands. To start, around a third of the land in the Netherlands is either at or below sea level. This gives the area or the land a high vulnerability to flood, especially due to sea level rise. The lowest point sits at 22 feet below sea level, and a lot of the dense population live in these coastal regions that are at that sea level or below sea level area, which gives the population high vulnerability to flooding. So, why is sea level rise such a threat in the Netherlands? To begin, sea level rise is mainly caused by climate change. This is from the melting of ice in the Arctic or polar regions, and also thermal expansion, which is when the ocean temperature is, as it heats up, the mass expands, which causes the sea level to rise. This increases the risk of things such as coastal flooding, which can damage infrastructure and risk lives, as well as storm surges, and it can also impact the agriculture by allowing salt water to intrude onto farmland. The Netherlands is very vulnerable to this, like I said, because of its low elevation and having so many areas in the land below sea level. As you can see in the graph on the slide, you can see how much of the Netherlands is predicted to be impacted by 2100. The light blue is mild impact, and then the extreme impact by flooding is the dark blue. They're predicting that 97% of the population will be affected by sea level rise in less than 100 years from now. There have been many flooding events that have happened in the Netherlands. One particularly impactful one was in 1953, known as the North Sea flood. This killed over 1,800 people. There was massive home damage and farmland, and it ultimately led to major changes in flood management policies for the future. In response to that past flooding I just talked about, there was early response to mitigate the flooding in the area, and this was done through dams, dikes, and storm surge barriers. As you can see in the photos, the top two show the storm surge barriers, one a newer photo, and then the one right underneath touching that photo is an older photo of when they first started setting these up. And then the second photo you see is of a dike, and this is just to absorb water that would be coming into land to hopefully mitigate the amount of water that would come into the land area. And this was known at the time as one of the largest engineering projects of the world because it was such a large-scale effort to reduce this flooding that was happening in the Netherlands. Some other more recent ways that the Netherlands is mitigating their flood and sea level rise impacts is through shifting a mindset from fighting the water to rather living with the water and embracing their flood-prone area that they live in. They're doing this by expanding floodplains, allowing certain areas to flood so that it wouldn't impact where they live. As well, they're strengthening their already known infrastructure like dikes and barriers. As well, they have more adaptive water management planning, and they focus on long-term climate resilience to hopefully lessen their impact on global sea level rise. One thing I find really cool is this photo I included of the floating trees. This is this is a cool photo that shows how they are actually living with the water rather than fighting against it and embracing their water resiliency. Also, there's a map on the side just visualizing how they've been able to mitigate and deal with flooding in their area over the past few hundred years. Some other ways that they are helping with the impacts of flooding or living with the impacts of flooding is by adding sand to the beaches to reduce the water coming onto land. As well, they're building up barrier islands, and mainly they're protecting their main port by installing a surge barrier that you can see on the top, and this actually opens up to allow boats to come in and out, and close to also stop the surge from coming in, as well as just constantly monitoring and upgrading the area to keep their port safe. Because they've lived with flooding for so long, they're having very innovative solutions now to deal with the flooding. One way is by having floating homes in neighborhoods. So rather having cities that are getting flooded, they're putting their cities on top of the water to move with the surge of water. As well, they have water plazas, which is basically an area in, like, I would say a city concrete area that is meant to flood. So when it does rain, instead of the whole area flooding, they have a low area of the plaza that is meant to flood so that the infrastructure on top doesn't get flooded. Lastly, they're innovating their agriculture by planting more salt-tolerant crops, as well as creating floating agriculture, as you can see in the photo on the side, allowing plants to grow on top of the water and utilizing that space that they have. They're improving water storage and irrigation and planning for long term, and keeping in mind that they possibly might have to relocate in the future. And like I said before, continuing to invest in climate adaptation and reducing their climate footprint. Overall, the Netherlands is a great example of a place using innovation and optimism to work with the environment rather than against it.